Welcome, Reanimated fans. This is episode 301 of our podcast. I'm H.A. Conrad, along with my intrepid West Coast host with the mostest, Stuart Tiffin. How are you, Stuart?
Hello, AJ. Nice to hear you.
Hello. And today we are really excited to be talking about the first couple of episodes of the last season of Walking Dead, season 11. So
yeah, we're going to talk about that, but we have one little piece of news first.
One which confirms our reason for being. Now,
kind of.
But go ahead.
So AJ and I I don't remember how exactly we discovered that we both were into horror movies. It was about, 12 or something years ago, right? And I think it might have revolved around seeing 30 Days of Night. I don't know if that's true, but I think we both saw that film separately, but then compared notes, and we had very similar takes. Is that what I remember?
I think that'll do. I don't know. I think we started talking about recurring zombie dreams
that too,
relating to such things, and maybe that's how it all started. But that's about right.
Yeah, but so CNET has an article out this week that written by a self-professed mega fan of The Walking Dead, except formerly, like years ago. I think is a lady who writes this. Yeah, Kim. Years ago, when I was a mega fan of The Walking Dead, she says she wouldn't watch it right before bed because she had trouble sleeping. But then, it's like in the intervening time, she has realized that actually, by ingesting horror films or shows like The Walking Dead, she actually has fewer bad dreams. And this is something that HA and I have compared notes on in the past too. Watch horror or zombie stuff and don't have bad dreams. And it all comes back to like how this is basically a cathartic release in watching horror, and it gives you a certain amount of endorphins and lets you sort of come to the end of this dark cycle, which in your mind you can just take to even worse places.
Well, I mean, and in my case, I don't know that it means I have fewer bad dreams, but I do more. I think by it's desensitized me a little bit more to at least the zombie theme and some other things. So I tend to have more lucid dreaming. So even if I'm having said dreams, I understand that it's not real, which was not the case before I started doing all of this. I guess self horror film therapeutic treatment, or whatever you want to call it.
There's a funny disclaimer at the end of this article saying this information is for educational and informational purposes only and not intended as health or medical advice. So they're not saying everybody should go out and watch horror right before they go to bed, but I mean, maybe you should give it a try educationally.
Well, weirdly, because I watched these two episodes and whatever, I don't know if it's directly related, but I had a very much like a sort of pod people alien invasion dream this morning. And again, it's, I do understand that it's a dream. And even within the dream, I'm like, I wonder why I'm having this themed dream.
I would have written this differently.
So it's kind of funny. But
very funny. Oh, and another tidbit. I mean, yes, this is a cool story, and I think people should read it. And the link will be in our show notes. But I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of Star Wars Visions.
Not yet. Nope.
We did a couple of episodes last night. They're probably not really appropriate for 5-year-olds, but I mean, they're not bloody, but it is anime, and anime can really just
be rough. Yeah,
there's a wide spectrum of what you might get with anime. But I watched the first two, and I gotta say I was quite impressed. Rather enjoyed.
Well, I will give it a shot.
Yeah. But then shall we move to Walking Dead season 11 episodes 1 and 2?
Let's jump into it.
The first thing I want to mention here, HA, is those opening numbers. 2.2 million was the audience for this season. This is an all-time low for a season starter. I don't think you're going to be surprised to hear that, but I think it's like 50% from what they started at last in season 10. Yeah, that was 4 million when they started season 10, 6 million season 9, 11 million season 8. And what I find a little bit confusing about this is that season 10 was objectively a far better season of The Walking Dead from 8 and 9. So it was kind of puzzling that.
Well, I think it's when they decided to do the premiere, quite frankly. I think that, having the premiere in August was a mistake. Like, I think you probably should do all of this post Labor Day, because I just think people, August is an incredibly bad month to do a premiere. That's just my personal opinion.
What do you
Um,
think are the contributing factors to it being a bad month for that?
I think everybody's away. People are getting ready for school to start. There's lots of stuff going on. I think as it relates to the pandemic, there's just definitely a lot of stress for parents about what's happening in the new school year. And people are on vacations. Like I think that there's shows that are successful, but even those like Ted Lasso, but even those shows basically started like well ahead of that. So it's like, and I also think that people feel like they can catch up. They don't necessarily need to watch it like that. And case in point, us.
Yeah, we certainly
So
don't watch it on TV.
right. So I think that these are all factors. I feel like the numbers and the way they tabulate these things is probably bad and needs to be reconfigured. There needs to be something else somehow applied, because I don't know that that's necessarily the real number, though I do think that August is a terrible month. I actually think probably more people are doing what we did, and they also save up a few episodes to be able to binge a little bit. And some people even save it until the end of the season. I have a friend who has actually not watched any of Ted Lasso or other shows because he really prefers to watch everything all at once. So he's like, oh, how many seasons are there? How far along are they? And so you have people whose viewing habits have entirely changed. And I don't know that the once a week thing is necessarily what everybody does anymore.
That's
So
fair. The notes on the Show Buzz Daily page where Wikipedia gets its numbers from also attests that despite the big fall for Walking Dead, it's still towered over the rest of Sunday's scripted cable. So it's still beating its competition. It's just that when you look at like the 17 million that it used to get, it's hard to make those comparisons. Even though the show, it's changed, but it is still a very well produced piece of TV. However, yeah, your point stands, and I do think that we're looking at these numbers, and these numbers aren't telling the story that we know probably is more accurate. But shall we delve further in? We've got Acheron, basically, is what we're talking about, parts 1 and 2 today, and both written by Angela Kang and Jim Barnes. I don't know if I've seen Jim Barnes's name in a lot of writing credits for this show before. Yeah, I guess last season he did 1 or 2 episodes.
yeah, I don't know that I have. But I mean, I think that this was like, we're kind of seeing what's happening with our group. Hilltop's been kind of done. They have Alexandria, and they're like really, there's like a food shortage, and the first sort of opening is them um trying to get food like MREs and stuff from like a bunker, I guess. And it is kind of an interesting idea. It is definitely, I mean, they started out with this like interesting kind of set piece where you have a bunch of walkers that have been basically like, I don't want to say they're hibernating, but I guess they're kind of like immobile because they have had no fodder, and so they're just kind of like quiet, and they're trying their best to keep it that way. And they all go in, and you get to see, your old favorites. You get to see Carol, Maggie, Daryl. You're kind of seeing their Magna. Who else was in this group? Sorry.
Yeah, so it's I mean, C. Thomas Howell is there
Oh,
too.
and see Thomas Howell, of course.
Whose name
And
is
I think
Roy, we
it's
find out later.
yeah, I think it's kind of funny that he's now entered into this world, but
Yeah, when he's been missing for a few seasons, but then suddenly they bring him back. But that's cool. I mean,
and I
hell,
have to say, and of course they have Kelly with them, but like I have to say the idea of bringing in a person who is impaired, like I know that they're, she is like very capable, but especially in this situation where like sound is such a thing that you want to make sure that you're trying to like both not make noise but also like no, be alerted if something's happening.
mm.
I think this freaked me out the most, just worrying about her.
She
So,
was completely fine though. It
no,
was really,
she was totally fine, but it was like stressing me out because I was like, oh, don't let anything happen to her.
as
um
usual. It was Carol who, if more than anyone, who was doing like going off script. I
yeah,
thought.
but it was cool to see the team working together. And I think that watching them like get all the stuff, and then Carol of course goes off script, but like I don't know. Part of me is like, okay, there's still supplies down there. You now have taken out so many of them, and you do have the upper hand because you're above. You could just take out the rest of them and go down and at your leisure get everything else in here. Like it seemed to look kind of weird that they didn't do that,
Yeah, they
right?
should at
They're
this
that
point just
desperate.
go in through the door on the ground floor and use
Right.
the choke point to to take out the rest of them. I mean, maybe this base is full of other zombies still that they
It
can't
could
take
be,
that
but
risk, but also that that vertical separation. There's an absurd. There's a few bad elements to this set piece, even though there are cool parts too, like the
oh,
girl
I kind of
power
have a
stuff.
feeling. I think I know what you're going to bring up, but go for it.
So the well, you know that my
Yes.
long-standing beef is the full auto. Yeah, but they even
Yes.
show how ineffective it is when Carol is using that rifle. They're like they actually at least have squibs now on the torsos of these zombies, and you're just like, man, you're just wasting that precious ammunition that you guys haven't even had in a season. Like there have been no firearms on this show in a season, right? Because it became so difficult to replenish. But they're just gonna still be a dumb TV show trope.
Yep.
And even though you can easily just hold down the trigger or squeeze it once and use one round per zombie, no, of course not. But honestly, the even more egregious, ridiculous thing was Daryl's two knife throws. Like I don't
Yep.
care how long you've been practicing throwing knives, you don't practice throwing knives down.
Right.
You practice throwing them across, right? And so
Right.
like the effect of gravity on those knives is going to be completely different. But unless he actually does like stand on a cliff and throw knives down the cliff at targets constantly, I don't understand how he could have done that as like within inches of Carol's head too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But hey, it makes for good television, right? And we
I
see Carol
guess.
again going off script and doing the thing and getting more MREs. And then you see why, because it's definitely dire in the community. They don't have that much food to last.
I
In
did
fact,
like that the payoff for this set piece was like 1 week of food. I thought
right.
that was actually, I mean, that's a good scene. It underscores the situation they're in. The bad part of that scene, this like council scene, is that all of Maggie's buddies are in there, and I'm like, you guys are new. What? Why is everybody trusting Maggie's friends just because she's there and she vouched for them? I'm a little bit. I'm unhappy with Maggie. I think I still have beef left over from when she basically got Rick killed, quote unquote. We've talked about that before in season 10, but now like her other posse shows up, and sure, they're a bunch of absolute badasses, and I love them all, especially Duncan with his giant hammer.
Yep.
But why are they in this council meeting? Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't get why they would be there because they're not part of it. And definitely I had a problem with that. Um Also, I just thought that like even sort of the logic, like yes, they're short on food and whatever, and now they're talking about a community. Well, there's a reason why she thought all of her badass people were dead, and then they're coming in here and they're coming up with this plan to go and get like food and animals, whatever. But you're kind of going into it blind. You don't even know if all of those things are necessarily true anymore.
No.
And then you're basically doing exactly what she's sort of describing happened before, which is taking the best people capable of defending Alexandria and taking them out of the mix, right? And to go on this kind of mission that they really don't have a ton of information on at this point, other than knowing that this group of people, I think her sort of reasoning is that there's not that many of them, and therefore, well, that if that's true, then how did they take over your entire community, right?
Yeah, they
So,
wiped out your community. They wiped out the other red shirts that she showed up with last season to the
right.
one dude, and that's her whole reasoning is like they only sent one guy after us. That means there's not a lot of them, or they just know that they are way more badass than you, and clearly they were because they killed I don't know how many people she had with her, like 8.
Right. So this whole logic and reasoning session that happened here didn't seem
A little
very,
weak.
very
Yeah.
full of logic and reasoning. And I also feel like the other people in this community that have been there the entire time are like, I don't know that they would have bought into this.
Not all of them did, right? And that was another weird thing about this council. Her people actually outnumbered
Right.
Alexandrians in this meeting. Like it was Rosita and Aaron who were like, no, we shouldn't go on a mission right now. We need to build back the wall. But then the other part of me is like, you guys beat killed the Whisperers off without any. Well, you had a little help from Maggie and Elijah, but basically by yourselves. I think you can handle putting these walls up now that you have Hilltoppers and whatever's left of Kingdom people and Alexandria. Like, you should
Right. You
have
have
the
enough people to
manpower,
do it.
I would think.
And then as we find out, further on down the line, Maggie is aware and knows of these different depots full of supplies and other things, which to me makes a hell of a lot more sense because you don't have to deal with these Reaper people. Like, so if you
Well,
have
we have to
knowledge,
see how much food is actually in these things,
maybe,
which
but you know what
we
I'm
find out
saying.
about that at the end of the next
If
episode.
you're
Right?
if you're being strategic and if your purpose is to basically keep this community going until you can either grow crops, find new hunting lands, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
maybe this stuff could be, you know, stopgaps and able to do it. I know you have big communities, but it just seems interesting that she only reveals that information later. Like, this, all of the stuff should be on the table, but I feel like like, clearly she wants to like take out the Reapers, but she has other motivations, I think, for doing this. Like, it all doesn't make sense just to support Alexandria, right?
Yeah,
So,
that is a good point, that they should have gone to those first.
right.
There's also, like, when we meet her, the rest of her badass posse, there's an interesting scene. Elijah seems like they haven't really developed him at all,
Mhm.
but he's the guy with the mask, right?
Yeah.
In last season, there was a scene where he took his mask off and just looked like he was shitting himself. Like, he's not
Yep.
a badass, or he is, but he's not. Like, he has, obviously, he's multi-dimensional, which is a good thing. And then in the scene where they meet the posse, he has this exclamation where he's like, Agatha. And he's I'm kind of liking this, like, two-tone version of this character that we're getting.
Mhm.
On the one hand, he is a ninja. On the other hand, he's like pretty emotional about certain
Yeah.
things, or filled with fear, or I don't know if it was like a I love Agatha, or Agatha's my mom. I don't know what it was, but it was still, I'm kind of hoping that they do more with that,
Mhm.
with his character. I'm getting a real by episode 2 of this season, I'm getting a real, oh, this posse is almost all gonna die.
Mhm.
Like, you're getting that horror movie uh team of vampire hunters in
Yep.
in like Blade 2 sort of vibe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, they definitely play up the whole tension between her and Negan. They bring him along because he has all this knowledge of like the DC area, so that's part of their reasoning.
As a gym coach, as a high school gym coach, he was
Yeah,
like super knowledgeable about the DC
yeah,
metro area.
apparently. Um,
But also, it's a question here. They want to get to Meridian, right? They came from Meridian. Why aren't they going back the way they came?
right. I mean, I don't know if it's like the element of surprise. I don't really, that wasn't totally explained, so there's that part too.
And
Um, and
yeah,
then there's also like you know, I have to say, like, the Daryl and Dog relationship is also questionable.
Dog's the new Carl.
Oh, Dog is definitely the new Carl, and like, you know, he can't be quiet, and you know, Daryl's always having to run after him, and he's just doing a lot of weird things that alert people to Daryl's presence. It doesn't seem like very, all right, well, if Dog's doing all this stuff, why are you bringing him? I don't know. It just seems a little strange. Um,
He's a total liability. It feels like I don't know that he's what is he like? They haven't shown him doing things that are helpful.
right.
Certainly not in these 2 episodes.
I mean, he's not finding Timmy down the well. He's
Nope.
like, I guess he manages to kind of take out a walker, sort of, but then Daryl actually has to take him out. And I don't know, it just seems a little weird. Like, I don't really understand what they're doing other than to have like the dog here. You know, I'm assuming part of it is that they're going to have that woman Leah show up at some point, which is, to me, I'm guessing that that's the point. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, no,
it
that has
feels
to be
like
it.
you're going to have to do something like that because there just doesn't seem to be any reason for him to be along. Because usually he also, like, I mean, he leaves him with Carol sometimes, you know, like when they're actually like doing stuff like this. So it just seems strange that he brought him. So, so I have to assume that Leah's going to show up somewhere around here.
Yeah, or like Daryl didn't bring Dog, but Dog just decided to go with Daryl because nobody tells Dog what to do. Dog has no
Maybe.
training and takes no direction.
Maybe.
It's possibly it too.
That could be true.
But by
Definitely.
the end of episode 1, and then they're walking down the road in the rain, They kind of set up episode 2 by being like, oh, we've got to get out of this rain. This rain is really bad. And I'm like, okay. And they go into the subway, which I know as a New Yorker, you're like, bad idea, jeans. You don't go in,
Yep.
you don't want to go into an abandoned subway system in a giant
Well,
storm.
certainly not when it's raining like that and you don't know what the structure is like, especially after years where things have been falling apart. And you know, I will say they're like walking around down there. Negan's even pointing out the water lines. At that point, they should have turned around.
Well, there was a lot of not listening to Negan,
Yeah,
which led to the the standoff that they had later and in the next episode. But all like when everything starts making those insane noises underground, Alden just puts his hand on the wall. Is like, oh, it's just air getting blown through the system.
no,
It's
dude,
fine.
it's rain because listen to the rain. Like, you know, and then again, you know, you're looking at a water line. What do you think's going to happen? You're in the underground and you have no higher ground to get to. You're also walking down these tunnels. You have no idea what's in there. You don't have any visual anything. Like there
You're
is,
just trapping yourself. Yeah,
yeah, you're
I'm
going it just seems, and this group knows, this group definitely knows better.
this adds to
Everybody in
my
this
rage
group knows
against
better.
Maggie. I just feel like she is making bad decisions. Negan is being he's making like good points, but everybody's just like, shut up, Negan. We don't want to hear from you.
Mm. And even Daryl knows better. So anyway, I just
Yeah.
found that to be incredibly frustrating. I found everything with this group to be frustrating to watch. You know, I think that they did some like, you know, and they run into this weird Walker graveyard, and it's like, okay, this is also a point where you should turn back, right?
I mean, it goes on until like you can't even see the end of it. And
Right.
then Maggie's like, we're gonna have to knife every one of these in the head. It's like, you are making terrible. I mean, sure, maybe if you had like 50 people with you, but you've got like your little team of 10. You guys are gonna show up at Meridian and be exhausted
Right.
and probably drown in this tunnel. So I don't understand why you're making these
Right.
choices.
And then
And
members of your team disappear with like, you
not
know,
just members, but C. Thomas Howell
right.
disappears, and this guy named Gage. And they had also sided with Negan, like, we should leave. And then they apparently just leave without telling
Right. But
anyone.
nobody notices, and they're the ones with the ammo bag. Like,
Who only has one ammo bag? Why
right.
wouldn't they spread? Oh God, it's just like, you guys want to fail. We've also had some flashbacks or cuts to the Commonwealth crew.
So this is slightly more, I mean, it's frustrating to some extent, but it's actually funnier. And this part I enjoyed a lot more. Basically, they're all getting interrogated by the Commonwealth people. And it's, you know, classic sort of like interrogation methods, asking them same questions to see if you get the same answers, seeing if you can break down whether somebody's lying or not. Also like testing boundaries and whatever. And, you know, in case you didn't know that's what they were doing, they break that down later when Yumiko basically calls them out on every single one of those points. But I thought that one of the funnier pieces of this was how Princess actually knows all the guards' names, and then she has like these like incredible powers of observation, and she's been kind of holding on to this, and they kind of are all looking at her like, wait, are you crazy or do you really know this?
The Paula Lazara keeps doing these amazing
Yeah,
pieces of work with her character. Yeah. And
she's really incredible.
I love that they gave her that superpower. Basically,
Yep.
it's like she's been watching too many telenovelas or whatever,
Yeah,
and it can just figure out everybody's body language, even behind the armor. It was fantastic.
yeah, so she's like calling out these different characteristics, and she's like, what is this useful? Kind of like really funny things. And then, you know, it's also nice to see the four of these characters working as a team. They're not going to give up the Alexandria storyline. They've all stayed pretty solid. You've also got you know, Ezekiel doing his king thing, doing his thing where he's like, I'm not going to take this. And you know, you have them, but you have them all coordinating together. And even though this is a particularly hard situation, there's a lot of like sort of buzzwords about processing, reprocessing. There's definitely a lot of very specific tactics that they're using. There's some thought that maybe the Commonwealth doesn't exist and that this is just a sham. And so they all decide to escape, but as they're on their way out, when Yumiko sees, or Princess sees Yumiko's picture, which by the way seems somewhat unlikely because did you see that photo? It was a little weird.
Yeah, it was
Um,
weird. It was like a fisheye lens almost.
right, right. I don't know that you would have noticed that at all, but I guess maybe they're throwing that into her
Huh?
powers of
Paula's
observation
off. Yeah,
bucket.
powers of observation, not Paula,
But
princesses.
you know, it makes them all turn around and give it one more chance, and then they have broken into the next level
But,
after a super awkward conversation with Eugene eventually.
yeah, I
And
didn't enjoy most of that
I did not
stuff.
either.
It
I
just
just
felt
felt
it felt like filler, and you know, a lot of this. There's one thing to do interrogation scenes, but it just also felt like it was a bit repetitive and a little boring, I think, by the end. Their escape attempt, so they came up with this plan to, I assume, take out two guards, or I'm not sure how they got the guard uniforms. Maybe it was because they took their armor off to have sex. I think that's what it
yeah, I think
was.
that was the
So they
implication.
stole their armor, snuck out, got back, put the armor back where the two guards didn't know that it was missing ever, potentially.
Yeah,
Is that what we're
I
thinking?
think that's the idea.
Because
Yes.
they are not in trouble for trying to escape at the beginning of the next episode, which is, I'm like, oh, really? Okay. I mean, they're freaking out more. Certainly, Eugene's freaking out more. I
Yeah,
kind of wish they'd showed some of that
yeah.
process of the
But
sneaking the
they
armor
didn't. You
away.
just have to assume that that's what they did, and they did it well.
Yeah, and the
Um,
other the other missing part for this for me is Maggie is contending that upstairs is death, above ground from the subway is death, and they never really make me understand why that's the case. In the
right,
next episode, Roy shows up after going upstairs, and he's all bloody, but apparently not bitten because they just
yeah,
patch him up. Um, and he's like, yeah, it was bad idea. But I'm like, tell me why. I don't
right,
understand why upstairs is bad. It was just raining. There were no people. There were no
right,
zombies. All downstairs, it's been all zombies and bad things happening to you guys. But why is upstairs bad? And I
right.
mean, by the end of the episode, at the end of the second episode, they go up and they run into some trouble, but I think they're doing it wrong. I don't, yeah,
My day.
Maggie, no, mine. Maggie doesn't really make that clear to me. And was that bothering you at all?
Yeah, I just think that it doesn't make sense. We don't get any kind of information about what is driving, like why they are so focused on staying below ground when clearly that doesn't seem to be a good idea. Even with Daryl, like when Daryl goes off on his own to chase dog and ends up on his own like little mini adventure,
What the
and
fuck?
eventually finds Rob, like there's nothing about anything that he's finding. Like he finds like that note from a kid to his parents and whatever.
What is that? What does that do for the story?
He sees other little things, but like there is nothing that even when Rob says that, like,
Roy, I think you're thinking
sorry,
of.
Roy. Yeah, they gave him a name and I forgot it. Roy. Um, Even when Roy like comes down, he doesn't say, "Hey, this is what happened to me upstairs," and you don't get any indication that anybody knows why it's dangerous upstairs. The whole reason why they went down there was because of the rain,
Yeah,
supposedly. And then, you know, I will say that the one sort of like piece that I did enjoy about all of this was some of like the set artistry. I think that whoever did that was amazing. Um,
sure. I mean, it's good set dressing. It looks impressive, but
and
it
it's cool,
doesn't.
like it's cool like telling like the little stories that we haven't seen, like what other people's lives are like, and I think
Mm,
what they had been like and what people did to survive. And I also think that that all plays into the whole speech that Maggie eventually gives, about the house that she found
you mean
and
where
the
she just
people.
describes an episode of the X-Files to everybody
Yeah,
and
she
pretends it was
basically describes
hers?
like it's very strange. um
I've seen
but
that episode. It was like The Road meets X-Files. It's
yep,
one of my favorite episodes of the X-Files, where the family of inbreds. So yeah.
yep.
But anyway, yeah. I'll so obviously I'm kind of I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder about Maggie so far, and I have since she came back to the show because I don't feel like
Well,
she's
I
ever had to
mean,
pay
my
for it.
other issue is that she's been away. She had been doing things for Georgie. You would have imagined that given all of that time away that she would have learned something. I mean, in part, she was running away a little bit because of her recklessness. Of course, also because the actor was on a different show, and we know
Yeah,
that. But
she had to go do
but
that terrible show.
but she's had access to all of this other information. I mean, Georgie seemed to have information about finding people and all of this stuff. I'm not seeing anything different about Maggie, even though
Yeah.
she's like, oh, you know, I'm a different person. She gives this whole speech to Negan
In
about
her, yeah,
how,
in her two monologues, she basically says all I've it seems like all she's learned is to be more vicious
Right.
because the world is worse than she thought it was.
But it doesn't seem like she's leveraging any knowledge that she's gained. And it seems kind of weird, right? Because the thing about Georgie, and at least what that piece and that sort of interaction seemed like, oh, there's hope, there's civilization,
Yeah.
there are things that are left over from that are good, that are positive about pushing humans back into the light, basically, back into the light of, like, science and technology and tools and being able to survive in this kind of crazy world. I don't get any of this from Maggie. I don't feel like she's learned anything. In fact, I think she's even a worse leader, if possible, than she was
And
before.
it's a little absurd to think that she needed to leave Alexandria to come to this realization that it's bad out there, because guess what? She was at Terminus. Like, she has
Right.
been on the show since season 2. She knows it's bad out there. We know
Yeah.
that as an audience. Anybody who's bothered to stay with the show as long as we have
Right.
knows that she knows that it's bad out there. So for her to come back and make the speech about how it's bad while she plagiarizes the X-Files, I feel like it doesn't really help anybody. But
Right. And then, I mean, the one piece that I think is, I don't want to say it's funny, but it's on point. But, like, when they're trying to escape the zombies over the top of the subway car, and Negan doesn't help her, and then she's all pissed about it. And it's like, well, what do you want the dude to do? He did, I think that Negan totally understands what he did. He understands that he can't actually atone for it with her, but they're both living in the same thing, the same civilization, and they have to coexist. And then, he just is sort of like, well, like, you can't say you want to kill me and then want my help. I think that there's some way to be sort of at a truce between the two of them, but she is actively looking to not do that. So it's like, I get that. So I thought that that piece was kind of interesting. But I also, there just, even the whole thing in the subway car, again, it's sort of like they don't, when Gage sort of, they have the whole standoff about who's, if they can rescue Gage or not. I do think that they could have rescued him. I
of
thought it was
course.
weird that they made this decision.
Well, this was a writer's room. Like, okay, this is how Negan is going to get away from with not helping her in the last
Right.
at the end of the first episode, because she's going to turn around and do exactly the same thing to Gage, and yet she's going to justify it. And I think everybody on the in the ensemble, like in character, is going to be like, it feels like we just did the thing that we told him was bad.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Right.
that I felt like was a fairly straight line.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
the only
agree, but I
person who
just
is
thought it
not
was
on board
dumb.
with it is Alden, because he actually has a funny but also problematic line in this episode where he's like, why aren't any of you looking at zombie Gage? You can't look at him, can you? And Gabriel Gabriel says to him, all that I see is the shell of a man who died a coward. And Alden's like, that's a pretty hot take, father. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's funny, but also I feel like hot take is a phrase that only really came around, I don't know, 2018, 2017, maybe. This
Yeah.
show should be frozen in its pop cultural references in 2010.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they have their own hot takes.
I'm sure
Maybe
maybe
they
they've
have
just
their
developed
own.
that term on their own. Sure.
Yeah, maybe. But I just think that whole thing, and it also felt very draggy. All this, to me, the timing of all the subway stuff and all that stuff
Just,
dragged
yeah,
along
it
with
feels
this, like,
like the culmination of a bunch of bad decisions, and they're like
right.
stuck in it, like literally.
This subterranean weirdness just was weird. I just don't, like, buy all of this. And then eventually, when they finally do make it up to the ground, and they've been reunited with Daryl, and of course Daryl comes in and saves the day, and you know does his whole knifey thing,
Yeah,
and
and
he's
wastes a
able to take
grenade.
out double the number of walkers that a group of, like, 5 people can.
Well, it was always absurd that they were like, oh, we can't open that door because if we open it, those zombies will get in. I'm like, yeah, there's like 10 of you. You're all bad. I mean,
Right.
bad in a good way. We've seen people on this show kill dozens of zombies, including you, Maggie, in season, what was it? When they were like all on the road before they got to Alexandria, they had that whole herd following them, and
Right.
they killed all of them.
Yeah, that's why this doesn't make sense, and it's a very poor writing decision. And you could say, well, we don't know how many are coming into this car. Well, they're kind of limited because of the one sort of, like, narrow entryway in.
Yeah.
The subway sort of path is pretty easy. Like, it's just like they're kind of stuck. Like, some of them can go into the subway seats and whatever, but it's not like they're coming through, like, a clear line of them. So it's actually, they're kind of limited. And even Gage probably could have taken out more if he stopped crying at the window like he
Just
was.
decided to kill himself first, but
Um,
didn't. What clearly wasn't dead yet when they started eating him, which was a
yeah, it was
mistake.
pretty
Yeah,
rough.
Gage also made bad choices.
He did, but again, I just don't. This is just to me very poor storytelling, and again, not in line with what we know of these characters. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, today we're going to make them not great at killing a group of zombies, even though we have seen them do this ad nauseum. But okay, so then they go above ground again eventually, and they are going to this depot that Georgie set up in Arbor Hills.
But the way
Um,
that they're going to it, let we just quickly, they're just walking in a giant gaggle down the road, down a road lined on either side with hanging corpses. I mean, they do just notice that, and they're thinking about turning around when they get ambushed. But the gaggle formation, I'm like, you guys are acting like you're just, I don't know, in like an alley for a photo shoot for the Reservoir Dogs or something. This is not how you're going to move in hostile territory.
Well, and this group especially knows better than to do this, and especially given the fact that they know that these Reaper people are out there and that they're quite stealth. And you just never know what is out there. And also, they have now seen all these like walkers with vocal cord cut. Like they know that there's something like not fantastic afoot. So you would think that they'd be a little bit more, they'd be practicing a little bit more spycraft, I guess. Something.
Stealth, I don't know. Yeah, like walking in a big gaggle down the middle of the road does not feel like the smart choice in any of these scenarios. But that's kind of how they're walking in the rain in that one scene, and then they're as soon as they get back out of the subway car, they're walking that way again. I'm honestly not super pumped about these first two episodes, and I feel like I'm getting the same vibe from you. It looks like then when the Reapers or whoever it is that ambush them show up, they're also walking in a giant gaggle. So maybe that's just how everybody walks now. They're like, yeah, stealth tactics. Let's just all gaggle our way down the street, because it looks better on camera than single file or onesie twosies.
We'll have to see what eventually happens to them, but it's sort of like it serves them right, honestly. And unfortunately, Mr. Howell is now exited the show because
Yeah,
they took him out with one arrow to the eye in the
was it
dark.
was it in the eye? Okay, I was kind of hoping that he would just bounce back up again, because he was looking kind of like a mix between Solid Snake and the dude, the injured guy on the rowboat crossing the Potomac by that
Yeah,
scene. When I saw him, I was like, oh my God, he's actually still alive. Like
I
Daryl
know. I
didn't
was
didn't
shocked he
ace
was
him.
alive too. So I thought that they would keep him alive, but it was like definitely, misdirection. They wanted us to think that, and now I think he's officially dead.
Yeah. Well, Wikipedia thinks he's dead. I'm holding out hope that he's gonna be like, I'm still okay, and he'll rock and roll. I want them to really pick up the direction of this show, and I'm a little bit. I don't want to say I'm disappointed by Angela Kang's writing here, but I mean, you watch her like on AMC Plus, you watch her like description of why she's making choices, and I feel like, yeah, these are good, but some of them also feel a little bit like fan servicey as opposed to true to the characters and the story. I'm hoping that they can pick it up a little bit and take this in a direction that it's going to be more enjoyable to watch than this first couple.
Yeah.
And maybe it has to do with like maybe Maggie has to have an arc and Negan has to arc too, and their arc together will result in something more enjoyable.
I felt like this was all setting the table. I didn't enjoy some of the telling of it, but I have to guess that this is supposed to just set us up for the rest. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot more about the Reapers. We're going to see a lot more about the Commonwealth. I do think it's interesting that, our group of four from Alexandria all managed to keep their story straight. Nobody broke, including Eugene at the end. And they all told a pretty convincing tale. I guess the
He's a
question
good
is,
actor in that scene. Like he's not just lying, he's
acting
acting
like, yeah.
well.
And it makes me wonder if the Commonwealth has more knowledge anyway. Like, so we'll have to wait and see. But very curious to see what lies beyond this processing center, and what happens in Arbor Hills. So we'll have to like, I have not spoiled myself yet. I don't know if you've moved forward
No.
yet, but I have not, even though it was very hard to. I did stop. Um, and so we'll have to check out the next thing. I do think you're right though. There's going to be an arc with Maggie and Negan, and quite honestly, what occurred to me is that they probably will end up sleeping together or something weird like that, given the
No.
tension that they have between them. I know that sounds somewhat unlikely, but
Oh
weirder things
God.
have happened.
I don't think that's possible. That is a hot take, HA. And I'll owe you a bottle of wine if that happens. My
Okay,
God.
that is a deal. That is absolutely a deal. I'm totally wrong about it. This is just me being silly.
I
But
think it's a bold take. So I hope it. You know what? If it happens, maybe they get
you
drunk.
build a tension and like an animus like this, and
It has to
I
end
have
in
a feeling,
sex.
okay, I don't know that they would have a relationship, but I think they may end up having sex.
Maybe some angry sex.
Some angry sex. So if that happens in this season, you definitely owe me a bottle of wine and vice
Deal.
versa. So we'll have
Deal.
to see.
Wow. Okay. What about Alden? Do we think Alden is coming home from this mission alive?
No, no, I
Mr.
don't think
Nice
he's
Guy.
coming home. I think the only people that survive are maybe Maggie, Negan, and Daryl.
What about Gabriel?
Maybe Gabriel. I don't know. It just feels
He's very much wrath of the Lord Old Testament right now. He might stand a chance.
he might stand a chance, but I think her whole crew, since they've been introduced so quickly, like I just think, and maybe, what's Mask Guy?
Elijah.
Elijah, maybe he makes it out, but I don't, but I have to, I think that likely the majority of these people die.
Yeah, like the lady with the bow and the guy with the hair.
Yeah,
Whose name?
no.
Her name's Agatha. His name I don't know. I think they're
Duncan.
the first two to die. No, Duncan's the giant dude, the bald guy with the
Oh,
beard. Um,
oh.
I
Well,
think
who's the guy with
Duncan.
the hair then?
I don't know. There's like another dude in her little posse. There's Cole, who has the two knives, who we met in season
Right.
10, and then there's this other guy with hair.
Oh, well, he's definitely dead.
He's definitely dead.
Since we can't remember his name, he's got to die.
Yeah. Uh,
But anyway,
I mean, we've already
um,
lost Gage and Roy, so the two red shirts for this mission are already out, and the rest of them are, you know, more or less not red shirted. So they will go though.
right. And with our other group, I can't wait to see a little bit more of Princess. I'm also curious to meet Yumi's brother.
Mhm.
But it's also one of those things where, I mean, we saw in Fear the Walking Dead that, you know, meeting your sibling or seeing
Not
who your
all,
sibling
not
is
always a good thing.
not always a good thing. So we'll have to see what happens there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all I have for this. But hoping the next couple are a little bit better.
Yeah. So I guess should we'll wrap it up and ask you guys to give us a holler. What if you have some different takes on these two episodes? If you think that Maggie and Negan might knock boots, let us know.
If you're on Team HA for this bet.
Team I don't know, Nagy or or
Nagy? That's pretty
Nagy,
good.
yeah. Or yeah, probably the
Or
problem is with
Neeky?
that M and an N, they sound the same. So you can say Megan or Nagy.
Yeah.
Maybe let us know. Reanimated podcast at gmail.com, reanimatedpodcast.com, and reanimated pcast on Twitter. Give us a holler and join us again next time. We're going to get into the next two episodes, which are going to be called Hunted and Rendition, episodes 3 and 4 for season 11 of The Walking Dead.
And until next time, ciao.
Alrighty, bye-bye.